101. At the foot of the sacred mountain. The Samo kingdom, finally grasping the gravity of the situation, mobilized their forces to counterattack. However, they were too late. The Star Luo kingdom had already penetrated deep into Cell kingdom territory. This time, the circumstances were different. The royal Samo family, driven by desperation, advanced with reckless abandon, sparing no expense in their assault. They swiftly breached the defenses of Stone Forest City, the formidable fortress falling to their onslaught. In a matter of days, they had carved a path of conquest straight to the foot of the sacred mountain. According to the Star Luo Queen's original plan, the Sky Temple had been prepared to mount a stalwart defense using the Star of Death. The natural barrier of the sacred lake coupled with the strategic advantage of the sacred mountain's terrain should have been enough to hold out for at least a day or two. But fate had other plans. 2 days before the Samo Kingdom's army arrived, disaster struck. The Star of Death, in a shocking turn of events, burst forth from the sacred lake. Uncontrollable and destructive, it ravaged the fishing grounds within before crawling onto land and lumbering off into the distance. Their desperate calls fell on deaf ears, it never looked back. Panic swept through God's servant city and the Sky Temple like wildfire. How could this happen? The Star of Death, out of control. It's inconceivable. We're doomed. All is lost. A palpable sense of dread gripped the people of God's servant city. Without the Star of Death, their chances of survival plummeted. Their worst fears were soon realized. Within mere hours of the Samo Kingdom's army's arrival, as the desert worm began its assault on the gates of God's servant city, a stream of people was already fleeing through the back roads. The foot of the sacred mountain became a sea of refugees. They abandoned the Sky Temple and forsook God's servant city, their faith shattered. Had it not been for their reluctance to damage the Sky Temple, the Samo Kingdom could have seized the city even more swiftly. Suddenly, the distant surface of the sacred lake erupted in massive waves. A terrifying beast emerged from the depths, its iron helmet-like body slamming into the earth. The impact carved a 1,000-meter trench in the ground, kicking up violent clouds of dust. With this single, devastating strike, the Cell Kingdom's forces at the mountain's base were thrown into chaos, their ranks shattered. Hiss! From the ground, a black magic fern sprouted with unnatural speed. In the blink of an eye, it transformed into a colossal plant, 100 meters tall, its tendrils entangling the Cell Sea Spirit. This was the Samo family's other beast, the Moon Magic Fern, unique among the Ru beasts for following the path of plant evolution. Woo-woo! A bone-shaking rumble emanated from beneath the sacred mountain. The earth split open as a monstrous worm bored its way out, immediately engaging the Samo family's desert worm in fierce combat. The timely arrival of the burrowing demon worm and the Cell Sea Spirit tipped the scales, momentarily stemming the tide of battle. On the distant horizon, dust clouds billowed as the armies of the Star Luo Kingdom and the Volcano Duchy raced back to join the fray. Atop the burrowing demon worm's head stood Henier, his sword raised high, pointing towards the controller of the desert worm. The transformation he had undergone was staggering. Power had reshaped him, imbuing him with a confidence and authority that bordered on the divine. King of the Samo family, Henier's voice boomed across the battlefield. You have 2 choices. Destroy God's Hall and face us in a final battle here if you dare. He paused, his eyes glinting with challenge. Or retreat now, ending this war. The choice is yours. The Samo family's king, unruffled by Henier's provocation, calmly inquired, where is the Xylong family's queen? Henier, his face a mask of composure, lied smoothly, Her Majesty is consolidating our hold on the Cell Kingdom. She'll return with the Sky Beast at any moment. The Samo Kingdom's king's eyes narrowed. Strange. The reports I've received suggest the Star Luo Queen is dead. Henier's laughter echoed across the battlefield. The Cell family, in their desperation to draw you into this conflict, will fabricate any tale. Preposterous. Henier scoffed. What power could the Cell family possibly possess to harm our great queen of Star Luo? Doubt flickered across the Samo Kingdom king's face. How could the weakest of kingdoms, the Cell, with just one beast at their command, possibly vanquish the mighty Star Luo Queen? The air grew thick with tension as neither side moved. The Samo family, for all their bravado, dared not desecrate God's Hall or God's servant city. Yet to remain here, deep in Star Luo territory, was a fool's errand. Every moment they lingered played into their enemies' hands. Weighing their options, the Samo Kingdom found neither the opportunity nor the resolve to wage a final battle at the sacred mountain's base. After a tense standoff, they made their choice. With heavy hearts, they withdrew their forces. As the Samo Kingdom's army retreated, jubilant cheers erupted throughout God's servant city. Her Majesty the Queen has returned. Our Queen is back. The Samo Kingdom flees. Victory is ours. The streets of God's servant city overflowed with ecstatic citizens, their celebrations spilling out from the temple grounds. Even the nobles and soldiers who had fled in fear now hurried back, eager to welcome the triumphant army. Yet their joy was built on a lie. For it was not their beloved queen who had returned. The Xylong family's monarch and their Ru beast had been lost in the devastating battle with the Cell Kingdom. A young priest of the Sky Temple, surveying the scene below, felt a chill of unease. "Where is the Sky Beast?" he murmured, his eyes widening in realization. "That's the Grand Duke of Volcano's burrowing demon worm." As the victorious army entered God's servant city, the Cell Sea Spirit glided into the sacred lake, taking up the mantle once held by the Star of Death. The burrowing demon worm, with Henir astride it, ascended the road towards God's servant city and the Sky Temple. Their progress was slow, almost reverential, as if undertaking a sacred pilgrimage. Before his return, Henir had capitalized on the chaos following their great victory. With the Star Luo Kingdom's army left leaderless, he seized his chance. Using the Queen's death as justification, he purged the military ranks, capturing most officers and reorganizing the forces under his own banner. The more unstable elements of the Star Luo Kingdom's army were strategically left to garrison the newly conquered Cell Kingdom. These soldiers, rootless in the Star Luo Kingdom and now surrounded by hostility in Cell lands, had no choice but to follow Henir's orders, guarding his latest acquisition. Henir himself returned at the head of a formidable force, the Volcano Duchy's army bolstered by those Star Luo Kingdom units that had first pledged their loyalty to him. Every soldier now marching into the city was under his command. As Henir entered God's servant city, a tidal wave of adulation swept through the streets. Grand Duke Henir, Grand Duke Henir, Grand Duke of Volcano, Lord Henir. In their eyes, Henir was a conqueror who had not only subdued the Cell Kingdom but also avenged their beloved queen. Now, he had transformed once more, this time into the savior of the Sky Temple and God's servant city. But perhaps most terrifying of all was the raw power at his fingertips, 2 Ru beasts, now under his control. As Henir and his army approached the palace, members of the Xylong family stepped forward, their faces etched with concern. "Where is Her Majesty the Queen?" they demanded. Without a word, Henir dismounted from the burrowing demon worm. With solemn grace, he shouldered a stone coffin and walked into the palace. He explained that the Sky Beast had undergone its final transformation, reverting to the primal form of a Ru beast. Though the Queen's remains were lost, they had recovered precious relics from among the Sky Beast's shed parts, the Xylong family's crown and the Yinsai scepter. The sight of the stone coffin sent shockwaves through the assembled Xylong family members and nobles of God's servant city. Their faces contorted with disbelief and horror as they recoiled from the grim symbol of their worst fears. "It can't be. Impossible. How could this happen? This must be some cruel deception. Her Majesty can't be dead." Henir closed his eyes, his voice heavy with feigned sorrow. Her Majesty the Queen, in her quest to reclaim the Cell Kingdom and restore the glory of Yinsai, has fallen in battle. Ignoring the outcry around him, he carried the Queen's stone coffin into the palace. With deliberate ceremony, he placed the Star Luo Queen's stone coffin upon the throne. Then, grasping the Yinsai scepter, he took his place beside it. In that charged moment, the returned commanders began to speak up, one by one. "The Grand Duke of Volcano has avenged our queen," one declared. "With the Xylong family's royal line broken, internal strife brewing, and enemies at our gates, I propose that the Grand Duke serve as regent in this time of crisis." Another voice joined in support. "Indeed, Her Majesty trusted the Grand Duke above all others. He alone can guide us through these turbulent times. The Grand Duke of Volcano is the true heir to the Star Luo Queen's vision," a third proclaimed. For the Xylong family's lesser branches, this turn of events was intolerable. One of their number leapt forward, his voice rising in accusation against Henir. But Henir, standing resolute beside the throne with the Yinsai scepter in hand, remained impassive. He offered no response, letting the tension build. Suddenly, a commander within the palace spoke up. "Her Majesty's death was no accident. There were traitors within the Sky Temple priest group, how else could the Ru beast have lost control?" His voice grew harder as he continued. "Someone in the priest group betrayed her, and they must have had help within the Sky Temple itself." Turning to the Xylong family member who had spoken out, he snarled, "Your outburst now only proves your guilt. You must have had a hand in Her Majesty's death." The accusation ignited a powder keg of emotion. Voices rose in a furious chorus. Seize the traitor, let him face judgment, for Her Majesty, vengeance. Before the accused could protest, frenzied soldiers surged forward. They struck him down and dragged him away, his cries lost in the uproar. The soldiers' murderous fervor sent chills through the assembled nobility. The once proud members of the royal bloodline and the haughty nobles now cowered in fear, not daring to utter a word of dissent. With Henier's army encircling the city and the overwhelming might of two Ru beasts, the burrowing demon worm and the Cell Sea spirit, at his command, the Xylong family found themselves powerless. They huddled together, trembling like quails before a storm. Henier had long since seen through to the true nature of these people. His words from before echoed with newfound truth. The so-called royal bloodline families were nothing without their beasts. Strip away that power, and their claim to the throne crumbled to dust. The beast is the throne itself. 102. The crowd in the palace hall formed a dense mass of people. Soldiers, servants, commanders, nobles, and priests of all ranks packed the once spacious chamber to capacity. All eyes were fixed on Henier, who stood beside the throne, the Yinsai scepter gripped in his hand. Their gazes held a myriad of emotions: awe, adoration, hatred, and ambition. Only Stan Tito seemed disconnected from the scene, his eyes locked on the stone coffin in disbelief. The fate of the kingdom and its future ruler held no interest for him. His world had narrowed to the stark reality before him. The queen is dead. He struggled to accept that Her Majesty could be gone so suddenly, feeling a devastation akin to the legendary King Yesiel upon seeing the shattered god statue. In his eyes, the queen had been the embodiment of nobility and strength. The sky beast's power had seemed almost godlike to him, soaring through clouds and sky. In his mind, nothing in the world of Yinsai could defeat it. He still vividly remembered his first time entering this palace as a mere craftsman and commoner. The queen had stood by the window, bathed in sunlight. That image was etched in his mind, sacred and breathtakingly beautiful. She had asked his name with warmth, her smile giving courage to the awestruck craftsman's son. It was then that he first understood the true meaning of royal bearing. Stan Tito pushed his way forward through the crowd, finally reaching the foot of the throne. He addressed Henier directly. "Grand Duke of Volcano, how exactly did Her Majesty die?" Henier lowered his head, his voice heavy with feigned grief. The queen fell victim to the sky beast's loss of control. Though we still don't know the exact cause of the beast's rampage, it must be connected to the Cell and Samo kingdoms. The entire royal army witnessed this tragedy. Henier sighed, adding, "Alas, I was besieging the city of sea spirits at the time and couldn't save Her Majesty. But," he continued, his voice gaining strength, "the queen's passing does not mark the end of everything. I, Henier, vow to make those responsible for Her Majesty's death pay dearly. I will also carry on her final wishes." Henier's impassioned declaration ignited a fire in the hearts of the soldiers and commanders. Their cheers echoed through the hall, a thunderous affirmation of loyalty to their new leader. Gradually, the nobles and priests glanced around before joining in with scattered applause. Stan Tito accepted the explanation, believing that only such extraordinary circumstances could have felled the noble and powerful Star Luo Queen. He had witnessed firsthand the devastating battle between the sky beast and the burrowing demon worm in the god-descended city, where palaces crumbled and the city lay in ruins. He had seen the Samo kingdom's beast breach city walls, people fleeing in panic, thousands trampled in the chaos. Now, once again, he faced the terror and death wrought by these beasts. He couldn't help but murmur, "O Ru, granted by God's grace. Why do you always bring destruction?" Henier announced his takeover of God's servant city and proclaimed new edicts. In preparation for potential war with the Samo kingdom, he ordered military deployments and personnel arrangements. With each pronouncement, Henier's grip on God's servant city and the Sky Temple tightened, his authority becoming absolute. As the crowd dispersed, Grand Duke Henier, at the eye of the storm, held Stan Tito back. Henier nodded to Stan Tito, saying, "Child of fortune, we meet again." Stan Tito's expression was sorrowful, indeed. "Though I never imagined our reunion would be like this. I remember what you once told me, only those who swim against the current can truly control their fate and the world around them." The Child of Fortune looked up at Henier, forcing a smile. "Congratulations, Grand Duke Henier," he said, his voice tinged with a mixture of respect and sorrow. Henier's eyes bored into Stan Tito's as he suddenly asked, "Child of Fortune?" Henier's voice lowered, his eyes intense. "Do you believe I am destined for the throne?" Stan Tito was taken aback. "That's not for me to say." Henier had already prepared to ascend the throne, but never in history had someone of his background become king. He hoped that the descendant of the great Saint Tito, the recognized child of fortune, would bless his ascension and prove the legitimacy of his claim to the throne, that he was blessed by the gods. If I were to become king, would you give me your blessing? If that day comes, I hope you'll hold Saint Tito's chapters and stand at my left hand. I'd even be willing to entrust the Sky Temple to you. Stan Tito was even more surprised. But I'm just an ordinary person, not a priest. Hennier was clearly not one to follow conventions, he was accustomed to breaking norms. What of it? Does serving the gods rely on power? No, it's about devotion to the divine. Hennier looked at him earnestly. Descendant of the saint, most devout child of fortune. Isn't it fitting for someone like you to control the Sky Temple and serve the great Yinsai god? Stan Tito replied, if that day truly comes, I'll consider it. He didn't agree on the spot but didn't refuse either. This aligned with his usual character, modest and compliant. He was just an ordinary person going with the flow. A few days later, the tranquility of night was shattered as a shadowy figure scaled the walls of the saint's family residence, an uninvited guest arriving under the cover of darkness. Stan Tito rose in the night to receive this visitor, the former high priest of the Yinsai temple in the god-descended city, one of his few friends in the Star Luo kingdom. The priest appeared to have come in haste, breathing heavily. His first words made Stan Tito's face pale. There's something wrong with Her Majesty's death. Stan Tito immediately stood up. What do you mean? What's wrong? The priest leaned in close. Before Her Majesty fell in battle, Hennier had given orders to his subordinates to wait for an opportunity. Hennier knew about Her Majesty's death in advance and had made preparations. The priest slammed his fist on the table in fury, his eyes bloodshot. This is all a conspiracy. Hennier must be connected to Her Majesty's death. Stan Tito asked, how do you know this? The priest replied, I never believed Hennier's words. To investigate the true cause of Her Majesty's death, I controlled this person. I extracted this information from his memories. With that, the priest produced an object. It was a newly formed sun cup, only palm-sized, with an illusion symbol etched onto its delicate golden petals. Stan Tito didn't reach for it, instead asking, what is this? The priest offered it to him, urging Stan Tito to take it. This is a sun cup imbued with illusion magic. I made a few of these. The information and images I extracted are stored within. It can also aid you if you encounter danger. Stan Tito hesitated before accepting the sun cup. He asked the priest, why give this to me? The priest replied, Hennier has his eye on me. If something were to happen to me, these secrets might never come to light. Stan, the priest's voice was urgent. You may not possess the power of wisdom, but I see in you extraordinary potential and strength. You are the descendant of Saint Tito, the chosen child of fortune. From the moment I first met you, I sensed you carried a great destiny, just like your ancestor. The priest gazed at Stan Tito with sincere eyes, as if trying to convey his deepest convictions. Stan Tito remained silent for a long while. He lowered his head, avoiding the priest's gaze. You think too highly of me. I'm just an ordinary person. The priest smiled. All legends begin with the ordinary and mundane. He left Stan Tito's residence, stepping onto the main road of God's servant city under the moonlight. Suddenly, he noticed shadows elongating and sliding past in the moonlight on the other side. The priest immediately sensed danger and ran quickly towards the distance. As he turned a corner, sounds of fighting and killing erupted. The struggle was brief, the outcome swift and brutal. Moments later, several priests from the Volcano Duchy emerged from the shadows. Behind them, a squad of soldiers moved with grim purpose, bearing away a burden shrouded in secrecy. 103. When Stan Tito learned of the priest's disappearance, he abruptly stood up, staring wide-eyed at the servant. After confirming the news multiple times, he lowered his head with a sigh and slowly sat down, supporting himself on the table. A complex mixture of shock and grim acceptance washed over him. The loss of a close friend stunned him, yet the priest's fate had long loomed as a dark possibility in his mind. He picked up the bone flute from the stone table and brought it to his lips. The bone flute's mournful notes filled the air, a haunting lament that trilobite men had used for generations to honor their departed loved ones. Now, he was the only one who knew Hennier's secret. Stan Tito never liked being an outstanding person. He disliked adventures and risky endeavors, preferring to carve his epic chapters and mythological legends in his workshop. But at this moment, he suddenly felt he could no longer retreat or evade. At the very least, he should reveal everything he knew. After finishing the complete melody on the bone flute, he lowered his hand. Are you a mere puppet, Stan? He asked himself. At this moment, the queen's voice from his coronation echoed in his ears. The spacious hall reverberated with echoes, countless eyes fixed upon him, the scene so grand and solemn. He was so nervous that his steps were stiff, his head spinning. Descendant of Saint Tito, from now on, you are Stan Tito, the inheritor of the great poet Tito's will. A smile flickered in Stan Tito's eyes, followed by determination. Perhaps, he mused, his voice barely a whisper, it's time to return what Her Majesty the Queen entrusted to me. After consolidating his power in God's servant city and fully grasping control, Henier still made the decision to ascend the throne. The Xylong family, who controlled the Star Luo kingdom, surrendered their crown. The entire Xylong family trembled under Henier's authority and power, not daring to resist. The coronation ceremony would be held in the palace of God's servant city in the Sky Temple. Henier would become the new king before all witnesses at the palace, then proceed to the Sky Temple for the final coronation before God. After everything was done, he would become the king of 3 kingdoms, the Star Luo kingdom, the Volcano kingdom, and the Cell kingdom. Dawn broke over a city poised for momentous change. The cloudless sky seemed to mirror the clarity of Henier's ambition, while soldiers stood at attention on every street corner, a living embodiment of his growing power. Thousands of commoners poured into the streets, heading towards the palace. Henier, Henier, quote. The dense crowd chanted Henier's name as they moved through the streets. In the eyes of ordinary people, Henier, who had saved God's servant city and driven away the Samo kingdom, was a hero. The city's commoners viewed him very favorably. At least, compared to the nobles and priests who had abandoned God's servant city and fled in panic, Henier's actions stood in stark contrast. Henier, holding the Yinsai scepter, stood before the palace, accepting the cheers of all. King Henier. Suddenly, someone raised their arm and shouted. With the first person calling out, the entire square and street soon echoed with voices hailing the king. Henier raised the scepter, and the voices quieted. I know many here question me, despise me, hate me. Because I am not a righteous king, because my origins are not so illustrious. In their eyes, someone like me is not fit to be king. But tell me this, Henier's voice grew sharp. These self-proclaimed righteous kings, these rulers of illustrious birth, what great achievements have they ever made? What meaningful changes have they brought to the world of Yinsai? Have they really done better than I have? Henier's voice was level, seemingly calm. But it made people feel full of power. Among those present, there are royalty, nobles, commoners, and slaves. There are soldiers, merchants, craftsmen, fishermen, and more. But everyone's status was determined from birth. Before, when other kings were in power, you had no chance for change. But now it's different. The calm tone suddenly transformed into a storm. Henier's eyes changed completely, becoming intensely fervent. He stretched out his hand and roared. Here, I guarantee to everyone, I promise to all subjects. I, Henier, will give everyone a fair chance, whether you are noble or commoner, whether you are the heir of a noble family or a bastard. Through effort, you can become an official of the kingdom, a commander. Even, he paused for effect, nobility and titles. No matter who you are, no matter what your status, we will change this world together. Henier's humble origins cast a long shadow over his aspirations for the throne, making support from the established nobility an unlikely prospect. Even now, almost all the old forces present were thinking about how to defeat and kill him. From the beginning, he was prepared to support new nobles and forces, determined to suppress the old families, especially those passed down from the eras of Yesile or even Redlichia. Only in this way could he establish a stable new empire. His speech left the audience momentarily silent. It also made those old nobles retreat in fear, one by one. Then, the square erupted in a tidal wave of cheers. King Henier, surrounded and escorted by soldiers, Henier headed towards the Sky Temple. The soldiers stopped at the foot of the Sky Temple, and Henier alone climbed the steps. At the entrance of the Sky Temple, Stan Tito stood silently. He held the saint's relic, also the key to open the door to God's realm. Henier's eyes burned with intensity. He would receive the complete, final chapter, from Stan Tito's hands, proving his divinity. Everything seemed perfect. However, things didn't go entirely as he had anticipated. Stan Tito, standing high and quietly watching Henier climb step by step, suddenly spoke. Just recently, my friend, a priest from the Sky Temple, suddenly disappeared. Henier, do you know what happened? Henier suddenly sensed something was amiss. Child of fortune, what are you saying? Stan Tito continued to ask. Before he disappeared, he had been investigating the cause of Her Majesty's death. But when he found the crucial clue, he vanished. He told me then that Her Majesty's death was related to you, Henier. Can you explain? Henier's eyes changed instantly, and he shouted in rage. Shut up, shut your mouth. But Stan Tito seemed not to have heard at all. He waved his hand, and an illusory projection appeared in the sky. The illusion projected Henier's words to his subordinate at that time, those ambitious and illusory words. The huge illusory projection allowed everyone in God's servant city to see clearly. All eyes were drawn to the heights, watching Stan Tito and Henier. Stan Tito also saw the chaos that immediately erupted in God's servant city. Clamor, noise, and shocked voices overlapped, but he couldn't make out what was being shouted. He didn't want to listen anymore. He left the main gate of the Sky Temple, walking along the side corridor towards the outside. Henier, the black swamp that devoured the realm of Yinsai. I will not crown you. With those final words, Stan Tito strode to the end of the corridor and leapt from the side of the Sky Temple. Henier's face changed instantly, and he quickly pursued towards the high ground. The other was the inheritor of this generation's Saint's will, the renowned child of fortune of the entire Yinsai realm. Even if he were to die, he couldn't die in this manner. Wu, the burrowing demon worm appeared at the side of the sacred mountain. Tentacles extended towards the air, grasping for Stan Tito as he fell from the temple and clouds. However, unexpectedly, the tentacles passed through Stan Tito's form. It was an illusion. The illusion dissipated in an instant, and all that fell was a small sun cup. Stan Tito had vanished without a trace, escaping with the final chapter and the key to open the door to God's realm. Stan Tito's mastery of advanced illusion magic stunned onlookers. The usually unassuming child of fortune had revealed hidden depths, executing a feat beyond even high-level priests. The burrowing demon worm came to the foot of the Sky Temple and handed the sun cup to Henier. Henier looked at the golden flower in his hand, but his eyes suddenly grew calm. Faced with this situation, with the various sounds from below, he suddenly let out a contemptuous laugh. Child of fortune, do you think this can stop me from ascending the throne? I once told you. He paused here, emphasizing each word. He declared, his voice ringing with conviction, am the one who swims against the current. He slowly climbed the steps, one by one, arriving at the main gate of the Sky Temple. He looked down at the chaotic crowd below, at all the questioning gazes directed at him. Then, with unwavering resolve, he placed the crown upon his own head before the eyes of all. Even if the entire world opposes me, I will still advance against the flood. This is who I am, Henier, and this is my will. 104. By the sacred lake, a craftsman carrying a basket of bone plates on his back looked back into the distance. At the bottom of the basket lay the final chapter, the object of countless people's obsession. Stan Tito left the sacred mountain and God's servant city with the final chapter. He didn't know if his actions would truly make a difference, but he felt compelled to act, and so he did. Even if it meant losing everything. Before, he had been the exalted inheritor of the Saint's will, with the potential to become the controller of the Sky Temple, one of the highest positions of power. Now he had lost it all, reverting to a mere craftsman. But he had no regrets. He even felt as if he had broken free from his shackles, gaining true freedom. The first half of his life had been spent going with the flow, following in his father's footsteps to become a craftsman, then fortunately becoming Stan Tito, the inheritor of the Saint's will. He had never truly considered what he wanted for himself. But this time, he felt the presence of his own will, a feeling of his life suddenly bursting into radiance. Even if it was just for a moment. It was the leap of his will in the river of life, the most brilliant instant of his entire existence. Time to go home. Stan Tito decided to return to his hometown, a small coastal town on the outskirts of the god-descended city, to see it once more before deciding his next move. Perhaps he would return to being a craftsman. Beyond this familiar craft, the world seemed full of uncertainty. After 7 or 8 days of careful, unhurried travel through various towns, Stan arrived near Stone Forest City, once the most important city in the Star Luo Kingdom. He hadn't encountered the pursuit he had anticipated. In fact, nobody he met along the way had heard any rumors about the child of fortune, Stan Tito, leaving God's servant city. Everyone only knew about Henier becoming king, the fall of the Star Luo Kingdom, and the establishment of Henier's dynasty upon the ruins of 3 collapsed thrones. Henier had, after all, become king. But he had suppressed the news about Stan Tito, as if everything would cease to exist if the king didn't mention it. However, Stan Tito's friend, that priest, had become an infamous traitor, branded as a spy who colluded with the Cell Kingdom to betray the queen. Even the minutiae of his past were exaggerated in rumors, becoming evidence of his vile character and betrayal of Her Majesty. In the towns Stan Tito passed through, tales of the priest's evil deeds were spreading everywhere. People angrily cursed and spat upon his actions, vividly recounting events from his youth and even childhood. Even his skill at swimming and swiftly catching ancestral fish as a child had become proof of his bloodthirsty, murderous nature. The populace devoured these rumors with unquestioning fervor. As Stan Tito listened, a wave of incredulity washed over him, the absurdity of it all almost overwhelming. The wicked can be forgiven just by laying down their weapons, while the virtuous are immediately cast into the mire for the slightest blemish. People of Yinsai, why are you so lenient towards the wicked, yet so harsh towards the good? He passed through the jumbled rocks of the stone forest, gazing into the distance. At the edge of his vision lay Stone Forest City, its majestic walls visible among the towering, chaotic stones. He had no plans to enter Stone Forest City, intending only to skirt around it on his way to the god-descended city. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the stone forest. The ground beneath his feet quaked, causing Stan Tito to stumble and lean against a rock for support. Boom! The earth split asunder, and a mass of writhing, vine-like tentacles erupted forth, twisting and intertwining as they rose skyward. In mere moments, they had formed a colossal plant, towering 100 meters into the air. It was a giant column composed of intertwined massive vines, without leaves, with a huge sphere hanging at the top. Stan Tito immediately recognized what it was: the Moon Magic Fern. As the vines bent down, the sphere on the Moon Magic Fern gradually lowered itself in front of Stan Tito. The sphere opened, revealing a young trilobite woman sitting inside, looking at the Child of Fortune. The huge sphere swayed, and she sat with her legs crossed, as if in a swinging basket. I heard that the descendant of the great poet, the legendary Child of Fortune Stan Tito, had a conflict with King Henier and left God's servant city. You wouldn't happen to be Stan Tito, would you? Stan Tito could tell from her teasing tone that she definitely knew who he was. Based on just a rumor, you can make such a guess and be so certain. The young woman laughed. All right. I've seen you before through the eyes of the Moon Magic Fern, descendant of the great poet, Child of Fortune. Stan Tito asked her, who are you? Although he had guessed she was from the Samo Kingdom, he didn't know her specific identity. The young woman replied, I am Princess Salomon of the Samo Kingdom, first in line for the throne. I came to negotiate with King Henier. The Samo Kingdom is prepared to sign a non-aggression pact with King Henier, but I didn't expect to encounter you here. Though she said this, it was clear that the young woman's mission wasn't limited to this. She also bore the responsibility of assessing the internal situation of Henier's dynasty. If she perceived any weakness in King Henier, any instability in his rule, the Samo Kingdom would spare no effort in launching a war against Henier. Princess Salomon looked at Stan Tito with interest. We've heard your story, heard that you're a fortunate person, a low-key individual. No one expected you to have the courage to challenge King Henier. Stan Tito, you can be more direct. I'm an ordinary and useless person, someone with nothing but luck. Princess Salomon shook her head. No, 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 Child of Fortune. To be favored by fortune and God is itself a most powerful strength and gift. Moreover, you still carry the bloodline of Saint Tito. If Henier's dynasty doesn't want to keep you, why not come to the Samo Kingdom? Stan Tito declined. You're not inviting me. You're inviting the descendant of Saint Tito, the entity known as the Child of Fortune. If I went, I would only become a puppet in your hands, a pretext and declaration for waging war. I'm just an ordinary, average person. I don't want to become your banner in the name of God. Despite his humble beginnings, Stan Tito possessed a rare clarity of self-understanding. Very well, but I believe that one day, you will come to the Samo Kingdom. The young woman turned to leave with the Moon Magic Fern. Before coming, she had heard about the Child of Fortune leaving God's servant city, but Henier hadn't issued an arrest warrant, nor had he stripped Stan Tito of his status. Henier had suppressed the news about Stan Tito, as if everything that had happened before didn't exist. She didn't know that Stan Tito had left with the great poet Tito's final chapter, which was now hidden in his basket. She didn't forcibly take the Child of Fortune, Stan Tito, with her, as it might give Henier an excuse to condemn the Samo dynasty. But she also didn't send Stan Tito back to God's servant city, because she felt this person would cause trouble for Henier. 105. In the distance stretched an endless sea. Though the roar of the waves was beyond earshot, the mere sight of the ocean filled Stan Tito's mind with the rhythmic melody of the tides. Ah, it's the god-descended city. The familiar city, the familiar scent of sea breeze. It all filled him with nostalgia. Though he hadn't been gone long, it felt as if he'd been away for many years. As he walked forward, he saw crowds of people gathered before a field of stone mounds of various sizes outside the city, the burial grounds of the trilobite men. Stone upon stone, the burial mounds rose from the earth in a tapestry of sizes, creating a vast and solemn necropolis. People gathered there with sorrowful expressions, mourning as they passed by and placing a stone on top, a custom of the trilobite men to remember the dead. The returning child of fortune asked, "What's this?" Someone answered, "We're mourning relatives who died recently in the beast disaster, those unfortunate souls who perished in the calamity." For ordinary people, the beasts were seen as natural disasters, as divine punishment. Stan Tito, all of these? The person nodded. All of them. Stan Tito looked at the overlapping burial mounds, counting at least hundreds, if not thousands. The joy and excitement of returning home instantly dissipated. The disaster was just the beginning, the suffering continues. He had witnessed firsthand the destruction and calamity brought by the beasts, and now he saw the pain and torment in the aftermath. He no longer felt like entering the god-descended city and went directly to Tito Town. He wanted to see the people of his hometown. Although not many in Tito Town had known him before, he was just an unremarkable craftsman's son. However, when he returned, he found that this once prosperous town had become a ghost town. Empty and abandoned, not a soul in sight. He walked through the empty town, feeling bewildered. Outside the town, he found an old man who used to live in Tito Town. "Where are the people from the town?" The old man replied. "Most of the craftsmen were conscripted to repair the collapsed palace. The rest scattered, some seeking refuge with other branches of the family. No one wants our goods anymore, and we don't have our own fishing grounds. We had to find other ways to survive." The old man sighed heavily. Tito Town, it's gone. With Tito Town's prosperity fading, everything else vanished with it. A bitter laugh escaped Stan Tito. "Her Majesty the Queen is gone," he said, his voice tinged with disbelief, "and yet they rushed to repair the palace." The old man answered, "The Queen may be gone, but didn't they say a new king has emerged recently? The Lord of the god-descended city wants to curry favor with him, rebuilding the palace to welcome the new king's arrival. They say only this can maintain the glory and nobility of the god-descended city." Stan Tito. Henir. The old man nodded. "That's right, that's the name." Stan Tito couldn't understand. Henir has just ascended the throne, how could he have time to come to the god-descended city and care about them? The old man shrugged. "The affairs of the great, how could we understand?" Stan Tito laughed, but it was an ugly laugh. Is it the beasts that brought destruction, or is it greed and desire that invited disaster? Under the craftsman's skilled hands, a stone slab as tall as a person gradually took shape. Chisel and hammer worked in harmony, transforming the raw stone into an exquisite carving. The craftsman poured his heart and soul into the artwork etched upon the stone slab. The picture depicted a somber scene. At the foot of the city walls, people wept and mourned for their lost loved ones in the cemetery. The city within was in shambles, nearly half of it destroyed by the beasts, still not fully repaired. Yet no one paid attention to the broken streets and houses. Everyone was busy rebuilding the palace in the center of the city. Slaves carried stones up the steps, craftsmen hung in midair constructing the towering Yesile palace, while nobles with overseers and guards critiqued from below. In one picture, it displayed the full spectrum of life. The sorrow of the common people, the lowliness of slaves, the toil of craftsmen, the arrogance of nobles, all vividly portrayed. Before, he had always reproduced the masterpieces of the ancients, but this time he finally had his own work, a piece truly possessing his own soul and will. With his life's first creation in hand, Stan Tito walked into the empty, abandoned town. In the center of the town, where the ancient castle of the Tito family once stood, a huge pit had been dug with many holes, each leading to deep caves underground. The priests from the god-descended city had dug the place inside out, taking almost everything they could to the god-descended city, enshrining them in Yesile Palace and the Yinsai Temple. Every brick, every stone, every flower had been taken away. Nothing was left here except for a deep pit. Yet in Stan Tito's heart, this place remained sacred. This was the burial place of the great poet, the place where God's messenger Polo and the Star Queen had perished. What was noble and sacred were not those relics and stones, but their will. He wanted to place his artwork here, dedicating it to the once great poet, his most revered ancestor. He followed one of the caves, heading deep underground. It grew darker the deeper he went, until finally he saw a huge underground cavern, completely submerged in seawater. He knelt on the ground, bowing towards the depths. To the great poet, he said solemnly, his voice barely above a whisper. Then, he resolutely placed his artwork into the seawater. The stone slab sank to the bottom, creating ripples. Plop! A clear sound came from the water, the ripples spreading to the distance as if touching something. Suddenly, he saw golden light flickering in the water. Following that, a sun cup blossomed amidst the light, illuminating the entire water surface and cavern. Stan Tito felt a sudden dizziness, and then he found himself no longer in the original place, but on a seashore. He saw a sea of flowers surrounding an elegant small house and yard. The relic of God's messenger Polo and the Star Queen. Is this an illusion? This wasn't his first encounter with illusion magic performed using the sun cup, he immediately sensed it. The flower bushes once full of sun cups were long gone, this could only be an illusion. Stan Tito walked through the illusory flower sea towards the yard, entering the house. The house was much larger inside than it appeared from the outside, with shelves piled high with bone plates like mountains, and stone tablet paintings hanging on all four walls, recording ancient epics and mythological scenes. He looked at the shelves and opened one of the bone books strung together. Bestowing of Power. Stan Tito was stunned. This was a divine technique that only a few among the royalty could master. He opened the next one, Forbidden Technique. At first, he didn't understand what it was, but upon opening it, he instantly felt as if he had touched something terrifying and quickly closed it. This was the forbidden technique left by Shlode Zilong, the first high priest of the Sky Temple and the most ancient high-level priest. In the end, he and King Yesil both died from this forbidden technique, and even the crown of wisdom was lost because of it. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind him, sitting quietly by the window, watching Stan Tito. Someone has finally come. Stan Tito was startled by the voice and quickly turned around. Backlit, he couldn't clearly see the other's appearance. But he felt the figure before him was somewhat familiar. I am Stan Tito. Who are you? The other replied. I am Tito. This is the memory illusion I left behind, containing my memories and power. Only those with pure hearts can unlock it. Stan Tito's eyes widened in shock as he stepped closer, the figure's features coming into sharp focus. The sightless eyes, the scarred face, there was no mistaking who stood before him. Great poet, he gasped, his voice trembling with awe. Saint Tito, he called out in shock, his emotions so intense that he involuntarily took a few quick steps forward, but then immediately stopped out of reverence. He looked at his ancestor and asked, why did you leave these behind? Is it because you left some kind of mission? The great poet sat quietly by the window, looking out at the garden. Everyone's mission comes from their own heart, not from others. This is a library, containing everything I left behind in my lifetime. I just didn't want some things to be forgotten, so I preserved them. As the words fell, everything around suddenly shattered. Stan Tito realized he was still standing in the dark cavern. But when he looked down, he found a sun cup had appeared in his hand. The flower cup bloomed, and a golden phantom spiraled out, its finger touching Stan Tito's forehead. Bestowing of Power. Stan Tito inherited the memories and power left behind by Saint Tito. 106. Stan Tito built a house in a remote coastal village far from the god-descended city, truly becoming a craftsman. No one knew his name, only that his craftsmanship was superb, creating carvings sought after even by the nobles in town. He watched the fisherman emerge from the sea as he sat on a rock, carving his new work. It was called, the Marionette of Fate. The figure in the story was himself, set against the backdrop of a dream he once had. Once upon a time, he had thought himself the child of fortune, only to discover he was but a marionette of fate. Luck, too, is a kind of destiny. It is the aimless drifting of ordinary people without goals or ideals. In mythological epics, he had heard of hero after hero, possessing lofty ideals, devout faith, great power, and more. They had endured all manner of hardships, possessing an iron will and an indomitable spirit. But he had never heard of anyone becoming great through luck alone. He had once enjoyed the power of such luck, until he met that person in his dream. The other told him, Tito said to God, fate is in our hands. I no longer wait for fate to descend, but create my own destiny with my own hands. No one but himself could understand the impact he felt in that moment. His ancestor was a great man who had grasped fate. He wanted to carve out the scene he had once seen in his dream, but he could not recall the other figure from the dream no matter how he tried. He carved out his own likeness, but finally stopped at the other silhouette, only sketching out a simple outline. He held his carving knife, suspended in midair for a long time. "Who are you?" he whispered. "How did you know about the great poet's past? How did you know what happened in God's Hall?" After pondering for a long time, Stan Tito still couldn't remember. He put down his carving knife and stood up, returning to the house, to the dark room where a golden divine flower grew. He approached the flower pot, and a magical scene was released from the golden flower cup. He reached his hand into the illusion, as if directly touching the things within. He flipped through one bone book after another, seeking to find what he wanted. "Sun cup," he exclaimed. "Divine flower, forbidden flower, dream flower, what are you truly? How many more wondrous and unknown powers are hidden within you?" After receiving the power of wisdom through the bestowing of power, he began to study illusion magic with the help of the Sun Cup. This power that most priests in the kingdom of Yinsai approached with trepidation. There came a knock from outside, and a trilobite man suddenly rushed in, bearing a blood-red brand on his body. This was a slave, but not Stan Tito's slave. Rather, a slave from a nearby fishery who always came around wanting to learn craftsmanship from Stan Tito. Although he hadn't said he wanted to learn, Stan could still see it. Stan Tito walked out from the innermost room and looked at the slave. Before he could speak, the slave excitedly said, "Master, do you know? The Samo kingdom has been defeated." Stan Tito nodded. "How badly?" he asked. The slave was somewhat excited, although he didn't know why he was excited. After all, what did these things have to do with a lowly, humble slave like him? But hearing such momentous news, he felt an urge to find someone to tell and share his excitement. The Samo kingdom might fall. Everyone's saying King Henir will become the new king of Yinsai. A new dynasty will be established, the times have completely changed. Stan Tito didn't care about the war. He felt that whether this war was won or lost, it wouldn't change the world. Whether Henir became king or Henir failed. Stan Tito tidied up the bone plates on his table and patted the slave's shoulder. The rise of a single king cannot change an entire era. No matter how powerful the beasts are, they can only bring destruction. War cannot bring hope, nor can it bring light to the countless people of Yinsai. History has always told us that the people of Yinsai have been going in circles for hundreds of years, ultimately returning to the starting point. Generation after generation of rulers, so many talented people have emerged. But no one has ever created glory surpassing that of King Yesiel. He lowered his head and sighed. "By abandoning God, we lost our ability to seek enlightenment." The slave couldn't understand what Stan Tito was saying, and could only scratch his head. He suddenly recalled the scene written in the final chapter, the thing that the great poet Tito had always remembered. Stan Tito was immediately stunned. He slowly said in a low voice, "The power of dreams that can create everything." On the desert plain, armies engaged in fierce battle. Two terrifying giant worms of different colors fought on the wasteland, while thousands upon thousands of soldiers on the ground clashed in formation. Spears fell like rain, tall and strong vanguard warriors swung their battle axes in collision, followed closely by soldiers raising stone hammers to smash one trilobite man's bone armor after another. However, the battle didn't last long. The desert worm suddenly lost control, barely stabilizing after a while. It was clearly no longer able to fight and could only begin to retreat. Thousands upon thousands of Samo Kingdom soldiers were routed, retreating into the distance following the desert worm. Many were captured, or lost their way in the panicked flight. In the capital city of the Samo Kingdom, the trilobite man sitting on the throne wearing a crown suddenly opened his eyes. He immediately touched his forehead. One of the Ru brands controlling the desert worm had faded almost to invisibility. Bang bang tilde. The king, appearing manic, frantically pushed over everything he could see in the palace, smashing and bending his inner fear and panic. A year ago, rumors that God had reclaimed the Ru beasts had already spread throughout the kingdom of Yinsai. Of course, the Samo kingdom would have known. But when they found out, it was already too late. Of the 7 Ru beasts of the royal bloodline family, 4 remained, with Henir and the Samo kingdom each having 2. But their desert worm and moon magic fern had already drastically consumed their power in one battle after another with the Star Queen. While in Henir's hands, apart from the burrowing demon worm whose power was about to be exhausted, the power of the Cell Sea spirit was still well preserved. This was the main reason why, in addition to his far superior military advantage, Hynir had forced them to retreat step by step. Hynir just wanted to exchange pieces with them, because in the end, he would definitely win. Damn it, the king roared. Despicable, despicable bastard, black mud who stole the throne. You think you can defeat me like this? You think you can defeat the royal bloodline that has stood unshaken for hundreds of years? Impossible. Amidst the agitation and roaring, what was expressed was his bravado masking inner timidity. He felt his throne and power crumbling bit by bit. He felt that what he had lost was not just the brand, but everything. The king's reddened eyes looked into the distance. Do you think we're powerless to control the Rue beasts without the Rue brand? However, these words immediately changed the expression of Princess Salomon, who had just entered the palace. She hurriedly came forward, kneeling and nestling at the foot of the throne. My king, she pleaded, at this time, perhaps only the power of God can guide us. The king laughed bitterly. God? No, no one can find God, let alone receive power from God. Since Saint Tito hundreds of years ago, who else has received God's favor? Princess Salomon hurriedly spoke a name, Stan Tito. Descendant of the great poet, the one known to the world as the Child of Fortune. It is said that the key to open the door to God's realm is now in his hands. The king gradually calmed down. He looked at his princess, the first in line to inherit the Samo kingdom. Can you find him? He asked, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Princess Salomon replied confidently, of course I can. I know where he is. 107. Stan Tito had another dream. In it, he found himself in a grand palace, carving in a corner. This place was a manifestation of his will and spirit. He preferred solitude away from the bustle of the world, enjoying the quiet to do his own work. This was his place of peace, his spiritual home. Compared to before, his dream now contained not only ancient scriptures but also many of his own works. He stood before his unfinished work, the marionette of fate, tools in hand. The craftsman looked up at his incomplete creation. A dream, he exclaimed. Could it be a dream spirit? The being who witnessed the great poet's audience with God. In his hazy state, Stan Tito had a sudden flash of insight. He finally remembered who he had seen before, even recalling their name, the sacred name recorded in the final chapter. Hela. As soon as he called out, the entire dreamscape changed. With the sound of his voice, ripples of golden light spread outward, and an ethereal dream door opened above. Stan Tito turned to look outside. A dream spirit, enveloped in fantastical starlight, a breathtakingly beautiful mythical being, descended into his dream. She wore a dazzling golden robe adorned with sun, stars, and divine dreams. Her bright golden hair danced in the air. Finally, like a falling petal, she alighted before Stan Tito. Marionette named Stan, she said. Were you looking for me? Stan Tito gazed at her, mesmerized. He had guessed, but never imagined it could all be true. Long, long ago, he had been noticed by God's messenger. This was a being who stood alongside the Mother of Life, Shelley, at God's side. It really is you, God's messenger, the dream spirit who wields the power of creation. Hela, the divine messenger standing at God's right hand. The dream spirit smiled. God is the Great One. I am merely a spirit basking in God's light. After a long moment, Stan Tito finally processed the dream spirit's earlier form of address. He laughed self-deprecatingly and explained. Noble and holy messenger of God, I am not a marionette. Though my name means stone tablet, I am not merely a reproduction of others' tablets, but can also become a tablet for carving my own works. I can drift with the river of fate, but I can also leap out of the water according to my own will. The dream spirit asked him, have you mastered your own fate? Or rather, do you understand the meaning and purpose of your life? Stan Tito shook his head. I have not yet fully grasped the realm of the great poet, but I have come to understand many things. The spirit examined him closely. Indeed, you are different. You have changed. Dream spirit Hela smiled and said, is this what Tito meant by the heart transforming through trials? Well then, why did you call for me? What do you wish to do? The spirit asked Tito. Although somewhat rushed, Stan Tito had many questions that had long existed in his mind. What he wanted to know most was the secret left behind by the great poet Tito. Would God truly bestow upon the trilobite men the power to create everything? Divine messenger, he asked earnestly, if we open the door to God's realm, will we receive God's blessing? The dream spirit told him, there is no key to open the door to God's realm. The so-called final chapter in your possession merely records the story of Tito's life. Whether God bestows the power of creation depends on how you choose. Only when the trilobite men give up the power of destruction will the door to God's realm open. Hope and light will descend upon the world, and the power of dreams and creation will usher in a new era. The divine messenger vanished from his dream, and Stan Tito opened his eyes, awakening. He sat up and looked out the window. The moon was eternal, the waves unceasing. Only by abandoning destruction can we create light. At the seaside cottage, King Henier's envoy arrived, finally meeting Stan Tito. But Stan Tito was completely different from a few years ago. Now he had inherited the great poet's power and legacy. In the realm of the trilobite men, apart from the king who controlled the beast's power, few could be more powerful than him. This change was evident not just in his appearance, but in his demeanor as well. He had grown more mature, steadier, and more self-assured. He was once high above others in God's servant city, called the Child of Fortune, but it gave people a sense of emptiness and frivolity, as if floating in midair. Now, though he had lost his former status, people felt he possessed more. He sat quietly by the sea, truly like a giant rock standing by the ocean, blocking the surging waves. It seemed that no matter how the huge waves crashed, he would remain unmoved. Henier's voice transmitted from the speech bug on the envoy's shoulder, directly reaching Stan Tito's mind. The war is about to end. The centuries of infighting, killing, and attrition among the royal bloodline will finally come to an end. The glory of Yinsai will be restored. If you return, Henier continued, you'll still be the Child of Fortune. I've kept the position of God's attendant in the Sky Temple open for you. He came to see this old friend, and also to show off and boast about his achievements. Stan Tito didn't turn around, focusing only on his stone carving. I know you didn't kill Her Majesty the Queen, but you stood by and watched her die without intervening. You have no loyalty, only ambition and greed in your heart. Henier was unconcerned. I've heard such words many times. What of ambition and greed? What of schemes and tricks? These things I cannot wash away, nor do I intend to try. Let them talk. I am who I am, and I am King Henier. As long as I can surpass other kings and achieve the unprecedented, no one will care about these things. Come back, Stan Tito. I am the king, and you are God's spokesperson. Together, we will create a new era. Stan Tito remained immersed in his work, ignoring Henier. After a long while, he finally stopped his carving knife. Why must you choose me? Hasn't the other branch of the Tito family always wanted to become the inheritor of the saint's will? Henier's voice suddenly changed, turning to mockery and disdain. Because, Henier sneered, they are unworthy. Stan Tito turned around. And am I worthy? Henier nodded. Of course, you are worthy of the name of the saint's descendant, because you are the one who truly inherited the will and power of the great poet. Stan Tito didn't answer, but suddenly asked Henier a completely unrelated question. Are you willing to give up the power of the beasts? Henier was taken aback, feeling this question was so familiar. This question, Henier mused. God's messenger once asked me the same thing. Stan Tito turned his head, asking with concern. How did you answer? Henier. I refused. Stan Tito looked at Henier, perplexed. Do you know, your refusal may have given up the future of the trilobite men. Henier told Stan Tito. I can't see the future. I only know to seize the present. Stan Tito withdrew his gaze and resumed carving his work. You might reunify Yinsai and achieve great things, perhaps even becoming a king as renowned as Yesiel of old. But I see no hope or light in you. Henier was even more confused. Isn't being comparable to King Yesiel enough? Stan Tito let out a low laugh. For a king, it's enough. But for the trilobite men, for the descendants of Redlichia, for our civilization, it's not enough. Far from enough. Stan Tito stretched out his hand, looking towards the sea. The world is moving forward, the river of time flows on. Why are we alone standing still? The civilization created by King Redlichia, could it have already become the setting sun in his son Yesiel's era? I don't believe it. This is not what King Redlichia would want to see. Henier said no more. He felt the Stan Tito before him had completely changed. He once greatly admired Stan Tito, thinking they would become friends, but now he felt the other was different. He even saw the shadow of the great poet in him. That was the existence known as a saint. As the power of the divine technique faded, Henier's voice slowly dissipated. You truly are different now. You are no longer a marionette, nor the child of fortune. Someone like you won't remain here as a craftsman forever. I will be waiting for you, at the Sky Temple. 108. In the remote town, a gathering was held only once a month. People from nearby trilobite villages would come to participate, making the town exceptionally lively during these times. Vendors sat on the ground, displaying a few simple items before them. The most common were various bone implements, rarer were precious stones and objects inlaid with gems. Among the food, ancestral fish was the most ordinary, along with some rare creatures caught from the sea. Tall trilobite men walked through the crowd carrying baskets woven from primitive ferns on their backs, leading children by the hand. Young people frolicked through the market streets. Today, Stan Tito also came to select things he wanted. Hey, a somewhat familiar voice suddenly came from behind. The craftsman crouching in front of a stall immediately turned his head, but only saw a back view. He stood up and followed, then met the person in a quiet corner of the street. It was a female trilobite person with snow-white bone armor. She looked at Stan Tito with a smile in her eyes. Stan Tito recognized her at once and bowed respectfully. So it's Princess Salomon. Princess Salomon stepped forward, her words full of regret. Stan Tito, you really have become a craftsman here. Stan Tito nodded. Because I was originally a craftsman. Princess Salomon shook her head. No, you are the descendant of Saint Tito, the chosen child of fortune. You shouldn't be wasting your potential here. You were born for a greater purpose. The noble princess extended her hand to Stan Tito. Come with me, she urged. Child of fortune, we need your help. Stan Tito quietly looked at her, his eyes unmoved. Help you with what? Help you wage war against Henir. I have no interest in your war with Henir, nor do I care who claims the throne of Yinsai. With that, he turned to leave. Salomon watched Stan Tito turn away, calling out anxiously. We just want to protect our own country. What's wrong with that? This war has gone on for too long, too many people have died. Stan Tito laughed without turning back. If you don't want to continue fighting, if you don't want more deaths, you can surrender now, and this war will end immediately. Salomon caught up. I hope you can help us open the door to God's realm, to make a plea to the great God Yinsai. Stan Tito, she pressed, even if not for ending this war, don't you yearn to become the second saint since your ancestor to have an audience with God? Stan Tito finally stopped. Something in Salomon's words had moved him. He turned around, looking seriously at Princess Salomon. He asked her, opening the door to God's realm requires you to give up some of your most precious things. Are you sure your king would be willing? Salomon immediately agreed. Of course. Our loyalty to God has never been in question. Stan Tito let out a soft laugh. What if the price is giving up the Rue Beasts? Salomon's eyes widened, hesitation appearing in her expression. But she still said, the king will surely make the right choice. For a moment, Stan Tito was tempted. He thought he might be able to persuade the princess and the Samo king to give up the power of the Rue Beasts, thereby receiving God's blessing from the realm of God. Abandon destruction, welcome light. Stan Tito sat in contemplation for a whole night, thinking through the entire night. He felt that this time, if he went, it might not be so easy to return. In the war between Henir's dynasty and the Samo family, he could remain neutral, but once he intervened, it meant he could no longer turn back. No matter what his reasons or initial intentions were, what awaited him was either a slim hope of success, or death, or an even more tragic end. But he still felt he should go, because he felt this might be the last hope. It was also, perhaps, the last hope for the Trilobite men to gain enlightenment and secure their future. Henir believed that becoming king would allow him to create a new era, but Stan Tito didn't think so. So many generations of kings, hero after hero, had been unable to change the status quo. Even if Henir became the king of Yinsai, he couldn't create miracles. He was just one among those kings. He might approach Yesiel, but could never become Redlichia. He believed, like his ancestor, that only the power of creation and dreams could give the Trilobite men a future. He quietly watched the sun rise, then stood up. Finally, he made the decision to set out. But before leaving, he was waiting for one person, to arrange everything that remained. On the coast, a figure came walking on the waves following the rising sun. It was the slave who often came to secretly learn craftsmanship. He bent over, panting, in front of Stan Tito. Master, you suddenly called for me, is there something wrong? Stan Tito told him, I'm preparing to go to a very far place. It might be a long time before I return, or I might not return at all. So, he continued, his tone serious, I have some important matters to entrust to you. The young slave was immediately stunned. He looked at Stan Tito reluctantly. Can't you not go, master? Stan Tito patted the young slave's shoulder. I can't. It's a very important matter. The young slave nodded and said, "Oh. Since it was a very important matter, there was nothing to be done. If it's your task, master, I'll carry it out to the best of my ability." Stan Tito asked him, "Do you have a name?" The slave shook his head. "I don't have a name. My master calls me Black Worm." Stan Tito thought for a moment, "Then I'll give you a name." Tilda. How about Sandon?" The slave was stunned. "Sandon? What does it mean?" Stan Tito lowered his head, looking into his eyes. "Preacher. That is, one who passes on faith and thought." The young slave still looked bewildered, but Stan Tito had already placed his hand on his forehead. A powerful force filled his mind, igniting the eternal light in his consciousness. Bestowing of power. The young slave saw a beam of light spreading before his eyes, dyeing everything a blazing white. He felt as if something had been opened in the depths of his mind, as if a new world had opened its doors to him. "What is this?" The young slave still didn't understand what had happened, but he knew he had gained something extraordinary. Stan Tito's words reached his ears, deeply imprinting in his heart. "Sandon. My name is Stan Tito, the inheritor of the Saint's will in the Tito family. Although you are not of the Tito family, Saint Tito's will was never inherited through bloodline. I hope you can inherit the Saint's will and my ideals. Saint Tito hoped to bring the spirit's power of dreams to the world, and I hope our civilization can enter the next era. This time I leave, it's to seek the future of Yinsai. Whether I succeed or fail, I hope you'll continue to pass on Saint Tito's beautiful wish and my dream. This is the origin of your name. It is also my blessing and wish for you." Stan Tito only gave a trace of his bloodline to the young slave, just enough for him to awaken the power of mind reading and consciousness communication, not enough to become a high-level priest. After all, he still needed to reserve power for what was to come. But for the young slave, this was already unimaginable. From an ordinary slave, he had suddenly become an inheritor of Red Lucia's mythical blood. After awakening his power, Stan Tito led him to the dark room inside the house, a room that had never allowed others to enter before. In the room, sun cup plants were cultivated one after another. Stan Tito brought Sandon to the central plant, lifted the flower pot and placed it in front of Sandon. This is the sun cup left by the great poet who had an audience with God, known to the world as Saint Tito. It contains all the memories he left behind, a vast library. Of course, I've also left some of my things in there. You can look for them if you're interested. At this point, Stan Tito smiled, but didn't specify exactly what he had left. The slave named Sandon held the sun cup, looking incredulously at Saint Tito's relic. Could such a thing really be entrusted to a slave like him? He was dazed, as if in a dream. It wasn't until Stan Tito stepped out of the room that he suddenly chased after him, calling out, "Master, I'm just a lowly slave." Stan Tito waved goodbye with his back turned, a smile appearing on his face. "Oh. Is that so? That's perfect then. I'm just an insignificant craftsman myself." 109. The capital of the Samo kingdom was called Anho, also known as the City of Dark Rivers. Beneath this vast, barren plain stretched an underground river system thousands of miles long, with a complex network of subterranean waterways. The Samo family had spent hundreds of years controlling the desert worm to gradually excavate this network. The Samo kingdom had thus extended their cities from the coast deep into the continent, nurturing their descendants beneath the dark rivers and breeding ancestral fish in the underground streams. This was part of the reason why the Samo kingdom had become a powerful rival to the Star Luo kingdom. Stan Tito walked through a corridor guarded by soldiers with long spears, heading towards the inner palace. Princess Salomon led the way. The palace had an ancient and rugged feel, yet it was imposingly grand. In this hall fit for giants, Stan paused and looked up at the king, seated atop more than 10 meters of steps. From that vantage point, everyone in the palace seemed insignificant, and the city outside appeared to be beneath the clouds. He could imagine the mindset of the person sitting there, wielding the power of wisdom, enslaving the Ru beasts. He must think himself a god among men. At first, the king received Stan Tito with a pleasant demeanor. He held this inheritor of the Saint's will, who enjoyed high prestige and fame in the Star Luo kingdom, in great esteem. His words repeatedly mentioned faith in God. He spoke as if he were the saint himself. However, when the king heard the price for opening the door to God's realm, his expression immediately changed. "What? Give up the power of the Ru beasts?" The Samo king fixed Stan Tito with a suspicious gaze. His first thought was, is this Stan Tito a spy sent by Henir? If they gave up the power of the beasts, wouldn't they become mere prey for Henir? "Stan Tito, your majesty doesn't know." The Samo king exclaimed heatedly. How could such a thing be possible? What proof do you have? There was no such requirement the last time the door to God's realm was opened. Stan Tito, you are deceiving a great king. Stan Tito turned back, looking at Princess Salomon. So, Stan said, his voice tinged with disappointment, this was all a deception. You didn't tell His Majesty the price he would have to pay. The princess dared not meet Stan Tito's gaze, and even trembled under the Samo King's glare, kneeling on the ground without a word. The Samo King snorted coldly at his daughter, then looked at Stan Tito. Child of fortune, since you've come here, I hope you can open the path to God's realm for the Samo family. Name your price. I will meet any demand you make. That black swamp dares to attempt to swallow the authority of the royal bloodline families and seize the realm of Yinsai. This will absolutely not be allowed. We are the descendants of Red Lucia, the rightful rulers of the Yinsai realm. The Samo King shouted. I want to open the door to the divine realm and tell God everything that's happening in the mortal world. God will surely punish him, banishing that son of black mud to the bottomless abyss. Stan Tito looked at the Samo King, at his ugly gesticulating posture and his frenzied eyes. Suddenly, he shook his head and laughed. This was something the old Stan Tito would never have done, but now he was fearless, for he truly found the king before him laughable. The Samo King didn't know what he was laughing at, but he heard mockery in Stan Tito's laughter, and even a hint of pity. The latter angered him more than the former. He immediately stopped his movements and looked at Stan Tito. What are you laughing at? Are you mocking the Samo family? Mocking the noble royal bloodline? After finishing his laugh, Stan Tito said, God cannot be fooled, nor can God be deceived. You have no sincere devotion or reverence. People like you opening the door to God's realm would only bring disaster and destruction upon the Trilobite men and Yinsai. And worse, he added, his voice lowering, you'll incur God's disgust. Then, he resolutely refused the Samo King. Not only will I refuse to open the door to God's realm for you, but I will also bear witness to your slow demise. A corrupt ruler like you should be swallowed by the black swamp. King of the Samo family, you've sat on that high throne for too long, so long that you've completely lost yourself. The Samo King was thoroughly enraged by Stan Tito. He shouted furiously, arrogant, how dare you, of all people, slander the exalted ruler. At his command, dozens, hundreds of guards rushed towards Stan Tito from within the palace. Several powerful priests emerged from behind the pillars, launching mental attacks at Stan. Divine technique, realm of illusion. A golden flower cup blossomed from Stan Tito's basket. In an instant, a circle of golden light swirled out, and hundreds of soldiers fell to the ground in the blink of an eye. The various weapons the priests attacked him with merely passed through an illusory shadow. By the time the priests reacted, Stan had already left the palace and was running towards the square. With his inherited bloodline power from the saint's later years and powerful illusion magic, he was nearly unstoppable. Seeing this scene, the king sitting on the throne burst into cold laughter. Just because you've mastered a bit of royal power, you think you can resist the noble royal bloodline. He raised his hand, and a giant beast emerged from beneath the earth. The moon magic fern opened its vines, immediately entangling Stan Tito. Faced with the power of this mythical monster, Stan Tito could only surrender. The king walked up to him and had people remove his basket, taking out all his belongings. But they couldn't find what he wanted. Where is the key to open the door to God's realm? Stan Tito looked directly at him. There was never any key. It's all just the work of people's hearts. The king was furious, but he didn't dare to kill the renowned Stan Tito outright. I will imprison you underground. We'll see how long your resolve lasts. In a cave deep underground, not far from where a dark river flowed. The moon magic fern had taken root here, its massive spheres hanging down, one of which imprisoned Stan Tito. Faced with such a prison, Stan Tito had no means of escape. Princess Salomon secretly came to the moon magic fern, looking at Stan Tito imprisoned within. Her eyes showed apology. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I did deceive you. I wasn't sure I could convince my father, as he's nearly been driven mad by Henir. If you hadn't come, my father was about to use another power, which is absolutely forbidden. To stop him, I had no choice but to bring you here. I thought that with your status as a member of the saint's family, my father would listen to your opinion out of respect for the great poet. I didn't expect. Stan Tito looked at the Samo princess who kept explaining and begging for his forgiveness, but he was lost in thought. I was prepared before I came. You don't need to apologize. Besides, He continued, his tone resigned. At this point, these words are meaningless. Princess Salomon thought he was just being modest. Then why do you sigh? The princess didn't know that Stan Tito truly didn't mind. When a person has lofty ideals and goals, they can calmly face the difficulties they encounter and peacefully deal with those who obstruct their path. Because they know that compared to what they're pursuing, these things are insignificant. Even they themselves are not worth mentioning. Stan Tito shook his head. I'm lamenting the fate and future of the Trilobite men, regretting our choices. God has given us chances time and time again, but we have repeatedly strayed from God's guidance. Stan Tito again recalled the figure of God's messenger, and the expectant look in her eyes when she spoke of God bestowing grace. At that time, he truly felt the messenger's hope for the Trilobite men. Although he didn't know if that hope also came from God, in Stan's heart, God must also have compassion for them. Stan Tito closed his eyes and shook his head. We have truly, he said, his voice heavy with sorrow, disappointed God. 110. Stan Tito was imprisoned within the giant sphere of the moon magic fern. The Sun Cup, his medium for casting illusions, had been taken away, leaving him without his greatest asset. Nevertheless, Stan continued to attempt various methods using his own power to escape from the moon magic fern's prison. Mental power couldn't breach the moon magic fern's defenses. This prison, which looked like flesh walls, was unimaginably hard. Illusions couldn't be cast. Without a medium, the light of consciousness illusion dissipated instantly upon leaving his mind. Nothing's working, he muttered in frustration. This method fails too. He even tried to communicate with the moon magic fern, a mythical beast, using the secret technique for communicating with plants from the forbidden arts of Shlode, the first high priest of the Sky Temple. Although he wasn't sure if this being could still be called a plant. However, as he employed the first part of the forbidden technique's power, he immediately sensed something was amiss. His consciousness plunged directly into another boundlessly dark place, a space where another consciousness and thought existed. Could this actually work? He wondered, a spark of hope igniting within him. His hand pressed against the flesh wall, his own mental power resonating with the moon magic fern. Surprisingly, the power of illusion intertwined with the will of the moon magic fern. He sensed a foolish and chaotic consciousness, a mind like that of a newborn child. Then, the light of illusion blossomed from the moon magic fern's sphere, circling around Stan Tito. The light of illusion, how could it appear here without the Sun Cup as a medium? Stan Tito stood up, his hand still touching the inner wall of the fleshy sphere, not letting go. He was carefully sensing where this light of illusion came from. When he smelled a rich fragrance, he finally understood why the light of illusion had appeared. This is the scent of the Sun Cup. Stan Tito had a sudden realization. So the moon magic fern was formed by devouring sun cups. No wonder the Samo family could cultivate such a unique plant form beast. By chance, he had uncovered the key to the Samo family's method of cultivating the moon magic fern beast. Stan Tito seized the opportunity, attempting to communicate with the moon magic fern's will to make it open the prison and release him. His consciousness moved along the boundless darkness towards the moon magic fern's consciousness. Just as he was about to see the distant light of consciousness, a brand like the eye of God blocked his consciousness tentacle. He felt as if that eye was like the sun in the sky, looking down upon him as insignificant as an insect. The mere light within that gaze was enough to scorch his consciousness to the point of dissipation. This was the fundamental form of the Ru brand, an existence invisible to the naked eye. Ah! Stan let out a scream of agony, his consciousness immediately retreating back into his body. Involuntarily, he covered his eyes, kneeling on the ground. All this, just from one glance at that brand that resembled the eye of God. Blood flowed from his eyes, and it took a long time for his vision to recover. He panted heavily, saying between breaths, "It's the Ru brand bestowed by God to King Redlichia. No one but the bearer of the brand can control the mythical beasts." Although he had failed, the appearance of the forbidden technique in the light of illusion gave him an inkling of a method to break out of the prison. An even more terrifying thought crossed his mind. Illusion itself was a power cast using the Sun Cup as a medium, with the most powerful illusion being the forbidden technique, possessing the complete forbidden power through symbiosis with oneself and the Sun Cup. And now, he realized the moon magic fern was an unimaginably powerful variant of the Sun Cup. He couldn't imagine how powerful the illusion would be if he were to graft the power of the moon magic fern through the forbidden technique. Graft the moon magic fern. The very thought made him shudder. He immediately shook his head. The backlash from grafting and symbiosis with the Sun Cup was already so terrifying and horrifying. Who could withstand grafting the power of a Ru beast? In the palace of Anho, the capital, His Majesty the King sat on the throne, gasping for breath while clutching the Ru sword. Several bodies of attendants lay on the ground. The bodies were dragged away by soldiers, leaving a trail of blood. Other terrified attendants cautiously came forward to wash away the bloodstains with water. The bloodstains were washed away, but the thick smell of blood lingered. King Henir's army was advancing step by step, conquering one city after another of the Samo kingdom, now getting closer and closer to the capital Anho. Henir was not in a hurry, he wanted to take down the Samo kingdom steadily and surely. The more critical the moment, the more steady he became. His generals were gradually consuming the Samo kingdom's strength, and every day brought news of another city being conquered or surrendering. The Samo family, on the other hand, was like a prisoner driven to the edge of a cliff. Princess Salaman looked up at her father on the throne. He no longer resembled a tall and majestic king, but rather a wretched criminal waiting for death on the scaffold. That kind of hysteria and desperate fear was constantly seeping out from within him. Killing and anger do not demonstrate a person's strength, rather, they reveal their inner weakness and cowardice. His Majesty the King, gripping the blood-stained Ru sword, slowly stood up and addressed the trembling Princess Salaman. I told you, your method wouldn't work. How could the lucky one from the Star Luo kingdom help us? We can only rely on ourselves. After venting, the king's words gradually calmed down. But the slight tremor in his final words hinted at a last touch of madness. Now, the king said, his voice barely a whisper, that's the only way left. The Samo king's words instantly made the kneeling princess feel a chill throughout her body. My king, the princess exclaimed, her voice trembling. Do we really have to use that method? It's even more terrifying than the forbidden technique. And father, no one has ever succeeded before. In her anxiety, the princess forgot the king's title and called out to her father. His Majesty turned back, his eyes full of madness. He let out bursts of cold laughter, like a cold wind passing through the palace and everyone's hearts. At this point, what other choice do we have? Should we just watch that son of black mud swallow our kingdom? We are the children of Red Lucia, we are the royal bloodline family, we are the descendants of Samo. His voice suddenly changed from a cold wind to a raging storm. How can we just watch a vile black mud obtain what belongs to our royal family? Come with me. It's time for you to see our final power, to see the secret of eternal life that the Samo family has been exploring for hundreds of years. The king led Princess Salaman to a sealed castle. This was the core residence of the kingdom's priest group, also the place where various divine techniques and even beast cultivation methods were hidden. Next to it was the garrison of the army, with extremely tight defenses. In the gloomy and dark passage, the damp and humid air surrounded them, making them feel extremely uncomfortable. In a large underground dungeon, she saw one trilobite person after another, like walking corpses, locked in stone chambers. The strangest thing was that they all possessed the power of wisdom. A trilobite person who was clearly just a child sometimes showed the innocent expression of a child, sometimes the deep weariness of an old man. She saw a person of the abyss, cursed by God to never be able to speak, muttering in the language of the trilobite men, constantly banging his head against the wall. She even saw a prawn knight releasing the power of wisdom, devoutly kneeling on the ground, chanting the Red Lucia covenant with its consciousness. The words were so holy and devout, yet Princess Samo felt chilled to the bone upon hearing them. What are these things? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. His Majesty the King laughed. They are not things. They were once trilobite men, some who should have died long ago. He showed a smug expression, as if displaying a proud work. Didn't you say no one had ever succeeded? In fact, it has already succeeded. They are the proof of success.